The rehearsal dinner ended before the appetizers arrived. That's the part people always want to know first. How does a party end before the food even hits the table? I'll get there. But if I'm going to tell this right, I have to go back to the Sunday afternoon in September when my son first brought her home. His name is Blake. He's 34, works in commercial real estate, got his mother's stubborn streak, and thankfully, my eye for detail. At least, I thought he had my eye for detail. Turns out love has a way of making even the sharpest people miss things that are sitting right in front of them. Her name was Tessa. She came through my front door carrying a bottle of Sonoma Pinot and wearing a smile that I can only describe as calibrated. Not fake, exactly. More like a smile that had been practiced in a mirror until it landed just right, warm enough to disarm you, bright enough to distract you. She kissed me on the cheek before I even extended my hand. Bold move for a first meeting, I noticed. Blake talks about you constantly, she said, handing me the wine. I feel like I already know you. I smiled back and said something polite, but I was already watching. Over dinner, that first evening, she was charming. Funny, even. She asked about my business. I spent 31 years building a property management company in the Charlotte area, sold my stake 6 years ago to my 2 partners, and now I keep busy with some consulting and a lot of golf. She nodded in all the right places, asked thoughtful follow-up questions. But about 40 minutes in, I noticed the questions weren't really about me. They were about numbers, not in an obvious way. Subtle. How many properties at peak? What markets were most profitable? Do I still hold any equity in the company, or was it a clean exit? I gave vague answers. Old habit from 30 years of negotiating commercial leases. You never show your full hand at the first meeting. Blake didn't notice. He was watching her like she was the most fascinating person he'd ever sat across from. And I understood it. I did. She was beautiful in that effortless way that costs a lot of effort to maintain, and she had a warmth that felt genuine right up until the moment you started paying attention to what was underneath it. After they left that night, I stood in the kitchen and turned the wine bottle over in my hands. Sonoma Pinot. Not cheap, but not extravagant, just expensive enough to signal taste without signaling money she actually had, a calculated gift. I told myself I was being a suspicious old man. I was wrong to dismiss it. Blake called me the following Thursday, voice lit up the way it used to sound when he was 12 and had just made the travel baseball team. Dad, I'm going to ask her. I ordered the ring. I wanted you to know first. They'd been together 4 months. I took a breath. Son, that's fast. Don't you think, Dad? Just that one word, the same tone he used at 17 when he'd already made up his mind and was only informing me as a courtesy. I just want you to be sure, I said. I've never been more sure of anything. After we hung up, I sat in my study for a long time. There are moments in fatherhood where you understand clearly and painfully that your job has changed. You can't carry him away from traffic anymore. You can only watch and hope, and if you're wise, prepare quietly. I called a friend of mine the next morning. His name is Dexter Colburn, a retired investigator I've known since we coached Little League together back in the 90s. He does private background work now, mostly for corporate clients. I told him what I had, her name, her Instagram handle, the company she claimed to work for as a wellness brand consultant, and the neighborhood she said she'd grown up in, Fairhope, Alabama, old family, she'd said, though she was vague on the details. Give me a week, Dex said. It took him 5 days. What he sent back was a quiet kind of devastation, not dramatic, just a series of facts arranged in order that told a story I hadn't wanted to know. Her real last name wasn't the one she used. She'd legally changed it 4 years earlier, a year after a civil lawsuit in Baton Rouge was settled out of court. A former boyfriend, a contractor, who claimed she'd borrowed $60,000 for a joint investment opportunity that never existed. The case settled for $42,000. She paid $12,000. Before Baton Rouge, there was a Memphis address, a different name on the lease. An eviction notice filed 18 months after she moved in, 6 months of back rent. Her Instagram showed a woman who attended gallery openings, traveled to Tulum and Lisbon, wore linen in the summer and cashmere in the fall. 47,000 followers. Post captions about intentional living and authentic connection. The wellness brand she consulted for had a website with no clients listed and a business registration that showed a single-member LLC incorporated 8 months ago, capitalized at $500. I sat with all of it for 2 days before I decided what to do. I didn't tell Blake. Not yet. I knew how that conversation would go. He would hear accusation, not concern. He would defend her before I finished the second sentence, and she would find out, and whatever advantage I had would evaporate. In my experience, and I have more of it than I'd like, the only time you confront a skilled liar is when you already have everything you need in hand. So I waited. The engagement party was Blake's idea. He wanted to host it at the Dunmore, a private event venue outside Charlotte that does these beautiful, candlelit dinners in their old carriage house. 60 guests, sit-down dinner, open bar, the whole production. He asked me to help with the cost. Of course I said yes. Tessa, I noticed, had opinions about every detail. The florist, the menu, the table arrangement. She emailed the venue coordinator 3 times before Blake had even reviewed the contract. She was staking a claim to something before it was officially hers. I recognized the pattern. I'd seen it in business, the person who starts rearranging the office furniture before the ink dries on their employment contract. 2 nights before the party, my phone buzzed at 11:40 p.m. It was a text from a number I didn't recognize. 5 words, "We need to talk privately." I stared at it. Then I typed back, "Who is this?" The reply came fast. "You know who this is. Before the party. Please." I turned the phone face down and didn't sleep much that night. The next morning I texted back 1 word, "When?" She suggested Thursday at noon, a coffee shop in Dilworth, not far from her apartment. Neutral ground. I showed up 7 minutes early, ordered a black coffee, and sat facing the door. She came in looking like she always did, put together, unhurried, that same calibrated warmth. She sat across from me and folded her hands on the table, and for a moment she just looked at me with something almost like admiration. "You've been looking into me," she said. "Not a question. Have I? You're good at being subtle, but so am I." She smiled. "I noticed certain things. The way you asked questions at dinner and then didn't follow up on my answers. The way you got quiet after Blake told you about the ring. A man with nothing to worry about doesn't get quiet like that." I sipped my coffee and said nothing. "I want to be clear," she said, leaning forward slightly, "that I'm not here to cause problems. I'm here because I think we can come to an understanding before tomorrow night." "What kind of understanding?" She looked at me for a moment. Then she said it plainly. "The way you say something you've rehearsed so many times it's lost any emotional weight. I want $250,000 transferred to an account I'll give you today. You'll tell Blake the wedding conflicts with your schedule and you're stepping back from involvement. I'll handle the rest from there." I looked at her. "And if I don't, then I'll tell Blake and anyone else who asks that you made a pass at me in your car after dinner in September. That when I turned you down, you threatened to break us up. I have texts I've saved that could be read a certain way out of context." She paused. "You're a 62-year-old man with a reputation in this community. I'm a 31-year-old woman. You know how that story lands." The coffee shop had that mid-morning quiet, the espresso machine running, a couple near the window working on laptops, light coming in through the front glass. Ordinary Thursday, extraordinary conversation. I looked at my hands on the table for a moment. Then I reached into the inside pocket of my jacket and set my phone on the table between us. Screen side up. The voice memo was running. It had been running since I sat down. I watched her eyes drop to the phone, watched the color change in her face. Not dramatic, she was too composed for drama, but something shifted. The calculation behind her eyes that had been running constantly since I walked in suddenly stopped like a fan that cuts out. Just stillness. "I've been recording this conversation since before you arrived," I said. "I also have a documented background report, a civil suit record from Baton Rouge, an eviction record from a Memphis address, and a screenshot archive of your LLC registration." I kept my voice quiet, the same tone I'd used discussing a contract amendment. "My attorney has copies of everything." She didn't speak. "I'm not going to threaten you," I said. "I'm going to ask you one time to leave my son alone. If you walk away now, I'll consider the matter closed. If you go through with the party tomorrow night, or if you ever tell Blake or anyone else this fabricated story, I'll forward this recording and the background report to my son and to my attorney, and let them decide how to proceed. Given that what you just proposed to me is textbook extortion, I suspect my attorney will have some thoughts." I picked up my phone, stopped the recording, and stood up. "I hope you make a smart decision," I said. "I'll see you tomorrow night, or I won't." I left her sitting at the table and walked out into the October sun, and I didn't look back, and my hands were completely steady. She showed up to the party. I'll give her this. She had nerve. The Dunmore carriage house was everything Blake had hoped for. Warm light, white roses everywhere. The kind of room that makes people feel like the best version of their lives is already in progress. I watched my son move through the crowd that evening with his hand at the small of her back, completely at ease, completely happy, and for a moment I felt the weight of what I was carrying. I'd told my attorney that morning. He confirmed what I suspected. The recorded conversation, depending on the specifics, could support an extortion claim. He told me to hold tight, stay calm, and not to do anything until we had all the pieces in place. What I didn't know was that Dex had kept digging after I told him to stop. He called me at 6:15, an hour before the party started, while I was knotting my tie in the mirror of the hotel room I'd taken nearby. "You need to hear this before tonight," he said. The man in Baton Rouge hadn't been the only one. There was a retired physician in Mobile, a divorced architect in Nashville. Both men had paid. The physician had paid $60,000 after she threatened to tell his adult children about an affair that, according to his daughter whom Dex had located and spoken to briefly, had never happened. The Nashville architect had paid $35,000. His attorney had advised him it was cheaper to settle than to fight the reputational damage. Neither man had gone to the police. Shame is a powerful silencer. I stood at the window of my hotel room and looked at the Charlotte skyline going pink in the October dusk, and what I felt was something colder than anger. It was the feeling I used to get before a significant negotiation, a stillness, a clarity, a settling in. I called my attorney back. He said the word I was waiting for, actionable. He said to let the evening proceed, stay calm, and document everything. He said he'd already made a call to someone at the Mecklenburg County DA's office he knew personally. The party was beautiful. I shook hands and told stories and let my daughter-in-law's sister refill my glass twice and smiled at the right moments. Tessa moved through the evening like everything was fine, like we hadn't sat across from each other over coffee 24 hours before. She toasted Blake with grace and genuine-sounding warmth, and I watched everyone in that room believe it completely. I didn't blame them. She was very good. After dinner, during the milling around hour when the speeches have ended and people are deciding whether to have one more drink, Blake found me near the windows. "Thanks for being here, Dad," he said. He had a glass of bourbon and his jacket was off, and he looked like the little kid who used to fall asleep in the car on the way home from baseball games. "I know you had reservations. I know I didn't make it easy when you tried to talk to me." I put my arm around his shoulders. "I'm your father," I said. "I'm always going to be here. You like her, right? For real?" I looked at my son for a moment. Then I said, "I think before you make any permanent decisions, there are some things we need to talk about. Not tonight. Tomorrow morning, you and me. Breakfast. I need you to look at some documents with me." His face changed. "Dad Blake." I looked him straight in the eye. "I need you to trust me for one more night. Can you do that?" He looked at me for a long moment. Whatever he saw in my face made him nod slowly. "Yeah," he said. "Okay." Tessa left early, around 9:30. She said she had a headache. She kissed Blake goodbye and smiled at me as she passed, a smile that meant nothing and everything, and then she was gone, and the party went on for another hour without her, and nobody seemed to notice. I was at his door at 7:30 the next morning with 2 cups of coffee and the folder Dex had put together. We sat at his kitchen table for 2 hours. He didn't say much. He read slowly, the way he'd always read contracts, going back to reread certain paragraphs, tracking the logic. At some point, he set the folder down and looked out the window at the backyard where his neighbor's dog was barking at something in the hedges. He was quiet for a long time. "The recording," he said finally. "From the coffee shop, yes, play it." I played it. He listened to the whole thing with his hands flat on the table and his jaw set. When it ended, he sat still for another minute. Then he picked up his coffee cup and drank the rest of it cold. "I would have given her anything she asked for," he said quietly, "if she'd just asked." There are moments in a father's life that break your heart, not because your child is hurt, but because you can see exactly how it happened, exactly how kind and open they were, and exactly how that openness made them a target. I didn't say anything. I just put my hand on his arm. "What happens now?" he said. "My attorney is handling it. The DA's office has the recording in Dex's research. There are at least 2 other men in other states who were targeted. That makes it a pattern." He nodded. "She's going to be contacted," I said. Whatever comes next is in other hands. He was quiet for another moment. Then, why didn't you just tell me when you first started looking into her? I thought about how to answer that, because you would have defended her before I finished the sentence. And she would have found out, and everything I was building would have been gone. I needed you to be able to see it for yourself with everything in front of you without her in the room. He looked at me. That was harder, he said, not telling me. Yeah, I said. It was. He called off the engagement that afternoon. He sent her a single text message. She called back twice and he didn't answer, and then she stopped calling, and that was the last contact. 6 weeks later, she was charged in Mecklenburg County with 1 count of attempted extortion. My attorney connected the DA's office with the attorney representing the mobile physician, and the 2 cases were coordinated. The Nashville architect, when he learned others had come forward, agreed to speak to investigators. I was not in the courtroom when she entered her plea. Blake asked me if I wanted to go. I told him I didn't need to be there. That chapter was finished for me. What I think about in the quiet moments is not the confrontation in the coffee shop or the folder on Blake's kitchen table. What I think about is the drive home from the Dunmore the night of the rehearsal dinner, the city lights in my rear view mirror, and the radio playing something I didn't register, and the knowledge that I had done the only thing a father can do when the situation calls for it. Stay calm, stay patient, and trust that the truth doesn't require drama to do its work. Blake is doing well. He took some time off, did some traveling, came back clearer. We have breakfast most Sundays now. He talks more than he used to, asks more questions. The stubborn streak is still there, but there's something else alongside it now. A carefulness. An eye for detail. He got it eventually, just needed a little time. There's a thing I've believed for most of my adult life, and that fall confirmed it. The loudest move in any negotiation is usually the worst one. The man who raises his voice has already lost control of the room. You win by being the quietest person at the table, by knowing more than the other side thinks you know, and by never once letting them see what you're actually holding. I reached into my jacket and set a phone on a table. That's it. That's the whole thing. But sometimes the smallest move is the only one that matters.